Good morning, GMF. My name is Max Hoffman. I'm DW's head of the Berlin Bureau, and I hope you all had a good night's sleep in the sweltering heat of tropical Bonn. And this is day 2 of Journalism Out Loud, and I feel like we all need a bit of a pick-me-up, and I thought that was a good idea. Do we have that song again, Christian, from yesterday? That one. I got it. Yeah, why not? Do not put this on TikTok, please. Don't put this on TikTok. Okay, so a lot of things happened since last night. What happened since last night? Since you were asleep in your air-conditioned room, right? You all have air conditioning? No? I'm sorry. 29 degrees in your room? How much?
I had a fan on.
You had the fan on?
The window open.
Window open? Did you get some sleep?
Oh, I got some sleep.
You got some sleep.
Tired enough.
Tired enough. Got it. Anyway, so you don't know what happened last night. What happened last night is that we had a system failure of Deutsche Bahn, for example, so no trains for 90 minutes in all of Germany. No, that's not normal. Even that's not normal at the moment. Then England went scoreless in the World Cup, so at least one thing that is as it should be. Anyone from the UK here today? Except for Jim, of course. Yeah, sorry, Jim. So that happened, and what else happened? And yeah, Elon Musk, he made, in that night, he made about $200 to $700 million, also on the promise of artificial intelligence. And that has something to do with our topic today, which is, journalism at large. And I don't know how you feel about it. I feel like we're getting kind of mixed messages. We're hearing a lot that journalism is more important than it ever was. We're hearing it here at the GMF, and we're hearing it outside of the GMF. At the same time, if you look at what's happening on the platforms, people losing their trust and all that in journalism, that's a very different message. So what me at least, I'm sure you feel the same way, right, is we need kind of an anchor. What's really going on? Where do we stand? We need data. And an anchor like that is, of course, the Reuters Foundation digital news report that comes out annually. I do admit, for me, sometimes it's a bit of a depressing read in parts, but there's also always a glimmer of hope. And Jim, I'm really counting on you for that glimmer of hope. Come on down. Jim Egan, the lead author of that report. All right.
Hey, Max. Morning, everyone.
So what do you want to talk about? The weather or the English football team?
You're really warming things up, aren't you? Let's talk about football.
All right, so your take?
Early stages.
Depression or hope?
Early stages. I'm not sure if there are any Ghanaians in. I think anyone from Ghana would say England were lucky last night.
Anyone here from Ghana? I know you came for a different topic, but this is important, please.
I'm sure if there was someone here from Ghana, they would be making a lot of noise right now, because I think they played really well last night. Very early stages of the tournament. It's a lot of fun. The match I'm looking forward to most is England-Germany, of course.
Right, we are too, especially penalty shootout.
yeah, we like those. And another reason why England-Germany would be a great match is, do you know when England would meet Germany in the draw?
I don't.
It would be on Sunday, July the 18th in the final.
Wow.
So.
All right, we can agree on that. Let's hope for that,
okay.
both of us. Let's get back to business. Is there anything in your report that will make us keep our jobs? Make us want to keep our jobs, at least?
Well, I hope there are things in the report that make people think very seriously about their organizations and to refocus efforts and to re-energize a sense of mission and importance, which I suppose is not really an answer to your question. I think in general, the data this year is quite unsettling in many respects. But we don't do this as an exercise in making everyone feel good. We do it as an exercise in trying to insert some facts and some comparative analysis across different markets into an industry and into an ecosystem that it's full of opinion, but not always long on what's actually really going on. So this is a serious undertaking that we do every single year. I'll take you through some of the highlights shortly. But please don't be depressed at the end of what I'm going to say. I hope that there is plenty which is food for thought, and which are particular points of departure for your own editorial and strategic discussions in your respective organizations.
Why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Max.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming along this morning. So we've got some slides somewhere. Here they are. Let me tell you a little bit about the research to start out with. I'll tell you a bit about the Institute. So the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism receives underlying funding and financial support from Reuters, but we're part of the Department of Politics and International Relations at the University of Oxford. So this is an academic research study supported by a number of very generous sponsors who you can see on the screen here. This is its 15th year. Many of you in the room may know the previous author of the Digital News Report, Nick Newman. Nick handed over to me last year and has spent much of the last 12 months chuckling as he's watching me struggling. We're trying to wrangle all of this data. It's an extremely large undertaking. We cover 48 markets around the world. We poll nearly 100,000 people in order to put together the results. And so we endeavor to make it as globally representative as possible. There are limits on some of the countries that we can actually get into and conduct robust online surveys. So this is probably about as far as we can take it in terms of geographic scope. But I hope very much that you find the results interesting, even if your particular country and market is not covered. So as I touched on at the beginning, although we've seen some stability in the data earlier on in the 2020s, things have moved a lot in 2026. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. But the main one is that people, frankly, are anxious. I mean, Excel spreadsheet and database data doesn't do emotion particularly well, but you can feel it in the numbers that we're seeing this year. People are really concerned about what's happening in the world. Beneath that, there is something quite fundamental going on. It's an acceleration of trends that we've seen in recent years. And we use the term platformization to describe the increasing importance of third-party platforms, social media and video networks like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, X, and so on, as the way people are discovering their news. And that's having a variety of consequences, a couple of which are that news is starting to become more video-led. Video as a format is increasingly important, in part because of the growth of these networks, of the role that news creators and influencers are playing, and I know that's a big strategic theme for many of you. And AI, as you're going to hear later on this morning, is having profound implications in terms of news gathering, news production and distribution. And we're looking at it through the lens of news consumption, and we're starting to see AI play a role as well. There is an impact, I think, both of what's going on in the world and what's going on in the news ecosystem. There's an impact on people's trust, on their relationship with news and information they're discovering and the extent to which they're relying on it. And for people here and people in the industry who are commercially funded, it's also having an impact on monetization. But, and this is the most important but, journalism still matters. In fact, in many ways, it matters more than ever because of that anxiety and that unease on the part of audiences that I described, as they see events unfolding at dizzying pace around the world, not just in conference venues and summit meetings, but in their own neighborhoods and everyday lives. And people still believe in some of the most important things that we hold dear within journalism, and those are really important to retain and to focus on as we continue our work. So that's a brief introduction. I'm now going to blast a bunch of PowerPoint slides at you without much apology, because this is data and that's what I want to try to show. I'm very happy to share the slide deck afterwards for anyone who would like to take a look at it. This is one of the big headlines this year. So this data you can see is data since, in effect, the end of the pandemic over the last 5 years. And these are people's answers to the question, what have you used in the last week as a way of getting the news, as a source of news? And the main headline here, as you can see in the circle, is we've seen this overtaking, this displacement of television and news sites and apps owned and operated by news publishers, by these social media and video networks. But beneath that headline, there's some interesting things going on. If you look at that line for social media and video networks, it hasn't really grown over the last 5 years. So this isn't a decisive shift to social media and video networks. It's people drifting away from bigger platforms such as TV news and also those news websites and apps. I'm not the only person in the room who will remember what seemed like not so long ago when print newspapers, broadcast channels were starting online properties and calling that new media. If you look at the audience and the way they're behaving, they think it's old media now. Let me try to illustrate that shift a bit more using this chart. It's a little bit busy, so I'm showing you answers to the question, what's your main way of getting the news, split across those social media and video networks, news websites and apps owned and operated by publishers and TV. And we're also splitting it by different age groups. And you can see basically, and this is 2021 data at a global level, for example, people aged 18 to 24, back in 2021, 40% of them said that social media was their main way of getting the news. Keep your eye on the chart and sort of the composition of those staircases and how they look when I show you the 2026 data. So you can see over the last 5 years just how significantly things have changed. And I've annotated on the chart there, PP means percentage point change in each of these platforms as a main source of news. And the thing I want to stress is not only are people moving away from TV news, as you can see down across all age groups, but people are also moving away from these owned direct sources of news discovery, news websites and apps. In fact, for younger audiences, people are leaving news websites and apps more quickly than they're leaving TV news. And that's really the principal thing underlying this shift or this drift that I want to emphasize. Nevertheless, you can see that it is still a younger audience-led preference for social media and video networks, even though we're seeing growth across all the age groups. And one way of illustrating the generational differences is by showing you some data that we conducted in the United States back in March, where we asked people what they thought was the best way of following news about the war in Iran. And if you look at the data here for people aged 35 and above, if you were paying any attention to the previous two slides, you won't be surprised by this because TV news for people 35 and above was their preferred way of following news about Iran. For people aged under 35, it's also almost the mirror image, right? So half as many people prefer TV, twice as many people prefer social media and video networks. And if you look on the right-hand side of the chart, more people aged under 35 in America were not following news about Iran at all than said they preferred to use news websites and apps. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is not only are people leaving some of these platforms, but for some of the youngest Americans and for some of the youngest people in your audiences around the world, people are never starting in the first place. So for audiences aged under 25 in America, more than a third of them have never watched TV news regularly, and the same proportion have never regularly used news websites and apps. So not only are they leaving, they're not even starting using these platforms. Okay, we're going to have an element of audience participation and involvement this morning because it is a lot of PowerPoint. It's a bit boring first thing of the day. So if you get out your phones, the guys in the booth are going to help by putting up a question that I'd really love for you to answer. So if we could switch to the first question, please. This is where you pay the price if you're at the back of the room because you need to zoom your phone in to that QR code on the left-hand side. But we tried this earlier. Hopefully it works. And it should take you to this question. And so the question, which is very easy to answer if you've read the digital news report, but hard if you haven't, is what proportion of people globally are saying they're using AI chatbots as a way of getting the news? So is it 10%, 20%, or 30%? Thank you very much, everyone, for taking part. Okay, so this is very, very interesting data. Can we just go back to the answers there, what people were saying? Okay, so the most popular answer is 30%, and that's very interesting. So back to the slide deck. I'll just move on, and I will show you the answer. If we can go back to the PowerPoint, please. It's only 10% of people around the world are saying that they're using AI chatbots for news at the moment. Now that's up 3 percentage points from 7% last year, and we're describing that as fast but not explosive growth. As you can see from the chart here, it's not the same everywhere. So to overgeneralize, on the right-hand side of the chart, you see the US and a number of European markets where it's slower. But there are definitely other countries around the world where adoption of AI chatbots is moving more rapidly. It's doubled year on year, starting to become a significant way of access. But it's a mixed picture here, and I think part of the reason is given in this next chart here, where I've just pulled out a selection of markets. And you don't need to read the chart too carefully, because the point of the chart is it's messy, right? So when we ask people why you're using AI chatbots for news, there isn't really one single thing that people are coming back to us and saying they find really particularly useful for it. If you look hard, you can start to sort of trace something around AI chatbots being quicker, the ability to go deep, ask follow-up questions, and so on and so forth. But I think perhaps part of the reason why we're seeing adoption of AI chatbots moving more slowly than you might expect is because of this, because there's looking like slightly better search engines to many people at the moment. Another reason is to do with trust. So trust in AI chatbots and news from them is very low at the moment, but that's not going to last forever. So when people start using AI chatbots for news, you actually see the trust numbers going up, and that's something to bear in mind. And please do not take away from anything I've said on AI chatbots that this isn't going to be a big deal. Okay, this is a snapshot of where we are in 2026, and this is what audiences are telling us right now. Let's change topics a little bit and talk about trust in news, because this is one of the big indicators that the Digital News Report has tracked since we started 15 editions ago. So it's time for another question. So if we can put that one up, please. We do see trust in news going down this year, as I hinted earlier. And which of these 3 countries do you think might be the market where trust in news has fallen most over the last 12 months? Here we go. Split views here. Lots of data coming in, very interesting. Okay, so largest number of votes at the moment for Argentina as the country that saw trust go down most over the last year. But it's pretty close. Interesting. Okay, so if we can go back to the PowerPoint deck, please. Here's the data for last year, and this is one of the most challenging slides that I put together this year. So this is change in trust, not over the last 5 years, but over the last 12 months. And you can see that in 29 of the 48 markets we cover, we have a drop of 3 percentage points or more in trust. And it's actually the Philippines where people told us that the proportion of people who trust most news most of the time is down by 10%. Just in a year. So 37% of people globally are now saying they trust most news most of the time. And we haven't seen a chart like this before. Like, data shouldn't move that much in a year. So what's going on? As I said earlier, I think part of it is just what's going on in the news, like the scale of change, and also the universal nature of what's happening in many of those stories seems to be bothering everybody. But I think there's something else about sort of consumption mix as well, and I'll try to illustrate that a little bit. So here are the 5 countries where trust in news has gone down most over the last year from the previous slide. But in addition to asking people about trusting news overall, we also ask people about 20 news brands in their own countries where they live, and we ask them whether they think those news brands are trustworthy or not. And actually, in each of these markets, you see that the trust in individual news brands And the fall or change in that trust doesn't mirror what's gone on in terms of trust in news overall. They tend to be much more narrow and sort of expected and predictable shifts of trust in individual news brands. And I think the answer to that is that people are still trusting these brands that they've grown up with, that they've become familiar with, they've established relationships with over the years. But what's happening is that those relationships are often becoming more distant. They're becoming more elongated as people are coming across those news brands less and less on broadcast, radio, print, and so on, and more on these third-party platforms where that relationship is intermediated. I've tried to illustrate that a little bit here with what I've called the trust gap. And on this page here, you can see trust in news overall, and trust in news on social media, and news on AI chatbots. Now, news on those two third-party platforms is much lower, as you can see here, than news overall. And as usage of those platforms on the right-hand side goes up, you're likely to see, as a consequence, trust in news overall going down. That's notwithstanding the fact, as I mentioned earlier, that people who use AI chatbots start to trust them more. Actually, it's not quite the same on social media. So among people who use social media for news, trust levels are actually still only at about 25%. Varies a lot. So in the UK, where I live, for example, only 6% of people who use social media for news say they trust news that they discover on social media. So there's an irony here that people are moving more and more to platforms that they trust less, and it may well be that in years to come we see that 37% number go down further. Okay, let me talk a bit more about this particular growth of video networks, and this is the best way of illustrating it. So again, this is last 5 years, this is global data. You can see on the right-hand side that for YouTube, in particular for Instagram and TikTok, these have really been the beneficiaries of the post-pandemic era. And what are those platforms more than anything? What do they have in common? They are video platforms. So this is the format that people are really gravitating towards. TikTok, 20% of people globally are now saying they're using TikTok for news. 34% of people saying they're using YouTube for news. But it's time for another question, because this is global data and it's not the same everywhere. So if we could have one more question, please. This is about YouTube for news, because the picture is very different in other markets around the world. So can we pull up the next question, please? So Kenya is where more people on our survey say they use YouTube for news than anywhere else. But what proportion of people in Kenya get their news from YouTube? 66%, 51%, or 46%? Like, it doesn't actually matter if you know the answer or not, but it kind of makes me feel better if you vote. Right? Okay. All right. Again, an even split of responses. I'll come back to the Kenya answer for YouTube in a second. If we go back to the PowerPoint deck, I'll show you some of the data globally for TikTok first, I think. So as you can see, even though 20% of people use TikTok for news on a global average basis, in a number of markets around the world, it's much more than that, right? So it's quite easy in Europe to consider TikTok to be relatively peripheral as a news platform. It is absolutely central to the news consumption of people in many countries around the world. And here's the data for YouTube. So congratulations if you said 66% of people in Kenya use YouTube for news, because that's the answer. Really significant, these two video platforms in particular for people's news consumption. And they are predominantly video networks, as I said earlier. And here, I think, is, from a sort of business strategy point of view, one of the more challenging findings from this year. So we have seen, over the last 5 years, significant growth in the percentage of people who are saying they're consuming news video online. So in fact, 3/4 of people say that in an average week, they are consuming some news video. And unsurprisingly, you can see that consumption of news video on these video networks and social media platforms has also gone up as well. But what's happened to the growth of online news consumption on publisher and news organization owned site. How has that grown? Well, the answer is it hasn't grown at all. In fact, it's down by 10 percentage points over the last 5 years. And I think this is one of the great conundra of the data this year, that despite the evident popularity of video as a format, publishers have been pivoting to video for a long time now, but audiences are not responding positively to on-site video in ways that I think really deserve further discussion. But to try to give you something a bit more positive to build on, although the pivot to video has been focused in a lot of the industry discussion about short form, that we see it's not true on all platforms. So if you look at TikTok video consumption does tend towards shorter videos, 2 minutes, up to 5 minutes maybe. But you see a much broader spread on YouTube. And in fact, there's a significant number of people, more than a fifth of people are saying they're watching videos of 20 minutes or longer on YouTube, about the same proportion saying they're actually watching live news on YouTube. And we see in the data that actually younger people are doing this more than their older peers. So it's not as if younger people will only ever pay attention to a video of 2 minutes in duration. Relatively speaking, younger people are keener on longer form video. Moreover, it's not all about the mobile device. A quarter of people globally are now telling us that they're using platforms like YouTube to watch news on the television set, right? So I think if you're in an organization that comes from a broadcast heritage and you're watching the numbers for broadcast TV news go down irreversibly, this is a positive point, that the TV set as a place for consuming news is not dead at all. In fact, it's living on in a different guise for interesting proportion of the audiences, although, of course, getting to those audiences through a platform like YouTube and so on is not as straightforward as the good old days when everyone just owned their radio towers and masts and was in direct control of that distribution chain. All right, let's talk about creators, because it's such an important theme that we wanted to try to get some data into the debate for this year. So here's some examples of different countries and their responses to the question of, do you get news from news-focused creators as part of your news diet? And you can see there are basically three different types of country. To overgeneralize again, in Europe, where the role of social media and third-party platforms is a bit lower, creator usage is lower, and the obverse applies at the right-hand side of the chart. So in some markets like Thailand, for example, nearly half of respondents are saying that they are using news creators each week. But we wanted to try to get a sense of, okay, creators are proving popular, they're growing quickly, but just how important, like how much difference are they really making in the news diet and people's news consumption? So final question on this, because I'd be really interested in views around the room as to that. So can we bring up the final question, please? So what percentage of people say they have all of their news needs met by content from these creators and don't use any traditional media? You think it's 23%, 13%, or 3% of people who have all of their needs met by creators and they just don't rely on any of that old-fashioned stuff? All right, seems to be a... I want to choose my adjective carefully, but 13% is the most popular answer. Okay, I'll come back to that. Bear that in mind. Let's go back to the PowerPoint deck, and I'll show you in a second. I'm not going to show you right now. I'm going to show you something on the way to the answer to that question. So we asked people. We said, to what extent are your news needs met by these creators? And the data that you see here represents people who said they have most or all of their news needs met by creators. Again, significant international variation on it, but the global average is 13% of people who say they have most or all of their news needs met by creators. When we drill down onto the question that I asked on screen that you just answered, is what percentage of people have all of their news needs met, it's only 3%. So 97% of our respondents are saying that they're still using established media. In fact, when you look at a market-by-market level and you compare the consumption of traditional established news media brands you compare it between people who are using creators and the average respondent, actually people who are using news creators are consuming more traditional media, not less. Right? So I think this is a really interesting finding from this year, that we live in a world where it's very easy to say there's a fixed amount of attention that people have, they're only going to devote so many hours in a day to news, and anything that's going to creators is coming at the expense of my business or my news outlet. That is not what the data is telling us, that creators are living alongside in a complementary way to established media. And I think there's as much to learn from the way creators have injected new dynamism, freshness, innovation into the news market as there is to be feared. We did ask people how they compared creators with traditional news brands against these 8 sort of different characteristics of news. When you ask all respondents, you get on balance, this is a net difference chart here, people perceiving that creators are stronger in these areas that I think you would probably expect, and weaker in some of those more traditional news value areas. It's quite interesting when you ask only people who are consuming content from news creators, they actually think that news creators are better on each and every one of these metrics. So interesting data there, I think, sort of weigh it up all carefully, but don't simply assume that creators are bad news for the news sector. Of course, not all news creators are the same, so we asked people to list news creators that they're using. This is just the German data here. Those of you who are familiar with or live in Germany will recognize many of these names. Some of them come actually from established media. Some of them are sort of completely new entrants to the market. Some of them are perhaps more credible than others, you might say. Some are on sort of more partisan in terms of their content mix. What you see in other markets is that there are more creator brands emerging where the creator ecosphere is more widely developed. You see them turning from individuals actually into serious businesses. And there's a bit less of that in Germany at this stage. Okay, I'm going to finish up by talking a little bit about the commercial side of things. So we asked people whether they are paying for online news. There's little change. So 17% of people globally say that they are paying for online news. We saw some movement in a few markets, but actually not much in most. But when you dig beneath the detail, I think there's some quite interesting diversity and nuance. So we asked people, what sort of organization are you paying to support? And I think, as you can see from this chart, that although traditional news organizations are the principal beneficiary of reader revenue, there's a variety of digital startups, some individuals, it will be some of these news creators, and also not-for-profit organizations as well, who are starting to generate reader revenue. And that's partly because people have different motivations for paying for news. When we ask people, why do you pay for news? These are the answers that we get. I think there's a helpful reminder at the top that the number one reason why people pay for news is to get access to content they can't get any other way, right? So the foundation stone of any successful reader revenue strategy is having high quality, distinctive content that's unique to your platform. But it's not the only reason, and as you can see here in light blue, that there are some social or values-based motivations for why people will pay for news in certain circumstances. And for different organizations in different territories and with different business models, that can be useful. Okay, so here's a brief recap of what I've tried to cover in the last 20 minutes or so. Some headlines here, many of which, as I say, are quite tough. This is an industry that is changing fast. It's not changing simply because of what news providers are doing or not doing. I think it's changing because of the shift in the consumption mix. Some of the data is changing because of news events that are beyond the control of anybody. But I think there's a lot of other things to reflect on and to build on, as well as I've tried to indicate on the chart. Don't be depressed by the data. Do take it seriously. We take the work very seriously, but I think there's a lot to build on here. And at a time when audiences are so anxious and so ill at ease, I think it's more important than ever that news organizations double down on your ongoing mission, your remit, doing what everyone got into journalism to do in the first place, which is to help people understand what's going on in the world and to make sense of and to chart its relevance to their daily lives. I'm just going to show you one last thing before we open up for questions. There is an enormous amount of data in the report, and this year we've completely rebuilt the interactive side of the site. So this is just a screenshot here of what you can now do. You can dig into the data in your own market or any market that you're interested in. You can cut it by lots of different demographics. You can look at the data over time. If you want to compare the data across markets, you're now able to do that. You can build your own charts, and you can also download that data into an Excel file for you to carry on and do your own work. So we hope you find that useful, because even though 82,000 words, the report is quite big, believe me, it only skims the surface of the data that's there, and this is a way of making that data open and available to everyone. Thank you ever so much for your attention. I really appreciate it.
You made it. Thanks, Jim. We're going to open it up to questions in a second. So if you haven't, we see the hands going up over there. Got it. Maybe this is also the time to give a big shout out to our technical crew and our technical director, Christian, who got this on the show on the road here as well. Jim, when I was watching this, I was thinking, do you kind of have a special message for public broadcasters, for public media institutions in there? A lesson?
Okay, I just didn't have time this morning. Please do read. There is a dedicated chapter on public broadcasters that we have, as well as, I mean, each year across the 48 markets where there is a public broadcasting and public media landscape, we do track reach and trust for those public broadcasters alongside commercial brands. But we also asked this year about what do people think about the social impact of public service media. So is it good or bad for your country? It's a very simple question. And we asked that in 26 of the 48 markets. There was a net positive view on that. So I think that's an encouraging thing for most public service media. It wasn't true everywhere. So there are 5 markets in Europe where actually people on balance think the public service media has a negative impact. So it's bad for life in their country. There are a number of reasons to do with that and to explain it. A lot of it, I'm afraid, is to do with political involvement in and influence on public service media, and that's something that comes out in this year's report, that people are very, very sensitive about the reality or the perceptions of influence on the part of government officials and politicians in the news. So if I'm ever asked by a politician, what's the best thing we can do for news? Stay out of it is the answer.
Okay, time for your questions. Let's go first. I think we have a microphone over here, yeah.
Which one?
Oh, by the way, if you could just say who you are, who you're with, and keep it to questions, that would be real nice.
So my name is Yasmina Janabi. I'm Audience Development Manager at Deutsche Welle. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have to admit I have already seen it on Monday when you held the same presentation for the EBU partners. And I had a question that you didn't answer on Monday, so I had to bring it up today, so I hope this is fine. Are you planning to combine all the survey data also with platform insights? Because I guess that this will make it more trustful and more reliable, and really seeing what the cross-platform consumption looks like in comparison to what your findings are from the survey.
Okay, so thank you for the question. I thought I got away with it in the EBU seminar on Monday, and I wouldn't have to answer any more tricky ones. So the EBU, for anyone who doesn't know, is the European Broadcasting Union. It's an organization of European and other international public broadcasters mainly. So I think your question was about combining our data with other sources. I think from time to time we have looked at that. It's actually extremely hard to do in a way that makes the data seem like it's more reliable. It actually sometimes has the opposite impact. And the ability for us now to have 15 years worth of like time series data and so on is something that we're really keen to hold on to. That's not to say that we're complacent about things. So for example, next year, I think we may well start combining offline and online reach into total reach, because I think that would be more meaningful. But as we increasingly move into what some people describe as a post-reach world, I think if there's a way of us being able to get at a sense of engagement as well as reach, that would be a useful thing
Yeah,
for us
please
to
don't reach anymore.
add to the survey.
Please, please.
Since we have Dima Tarhini right next with a question.
Hi, good morning. Dima Tarhini, DW Arabiya, Head of Talks Unit. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's very useful, and basically we've been discussing this also yesterday, and you brought the data, so thank you. My question, very short, the Middle East. I missed the Middle East. Do you have some data about the Middle East, especially the Generation Z is the highest rate in population, and also the Middle East right now is the core of the news. I know it's challenging for all of us to bring data, but at least from the GCC countries, I think that would be useful. I know you did it in January, February, but I mean the mess in the Middle East, it's since many, many years. So I hope you have some data, or
Look,
you are going to bring some.
I totally understand. I empathize with where the question is coming from. To be honest, there are some practical reasons why we can't extend everywhere around the world. One is we have to make some choices within the budget available where we can cover. So the only Arabic-speaking market that we're currently covering is Morocco. We are also prevented in some instances from asking some of the questions we would like to ask. So governments just refuse for us to ask some questions about engagement in politics and so on and so forth. And also, there are some other places, I don't think the GCC would be an example, but just to illustrate, there are some other places where it's just practically not possible to put together an online sample that would be nationally representative of the population. So for now, I think we're kind of at the outer limit of how many countries we can cover. But together with our research partners, it's always an active conversation, because being as globally representative as we possibly could that remains an ongoing ambition for us.
Question over here.
Hi, I'm Donata Dröge from RTL, a private media house in Germany. And if I got it, I wanted to know whether I got it right, that in Germany, the trust in news didn't drop, but it was increasing a little bit. And if so, why is this? Do you know any more information about it? Could you give any more information about it?
Yeah, the sort of the unhelpful and facetious answer I have to every question about, well, why has the data moved, is, well, because that's what the audience told us, right? So that's not very useful. And you are right that the numbers did not move in Germany very much this year. We actually, from a research point of view, it's only if the numbers move by 3 percentage points or more do we count that a statistically significant change. So we would say that the numbers haven't changed in Germany over the last year. That may be because in Germany, actually, the role of social media and video networks is relatively lower than it is in some of the other markets that I've talked about. So this environmental impact may not be as profound. And I think it does depend a little bit on news events, and it also depends a little bit on the time at which we conduct the polling at the beginning of the year. And in some markets which were particularly noisy and particularly volatile, you've seen the trust in news number drop by more, and the converse applies and may well apply to Germany, I think, this year.
We have a question over here.
Yeah, my name is Julius Ender from DW Academy. I'm trying to understand what you really try to analyze, because did you give the a definition for use for all who answering your question? Because what I saw on the slide is that you put Mr. Wissen to Go, like from Germany, as a top player on YouTube, but this is a guy who is like also in the entertainment, more background information. So what is your definition of use, and what are we really comparing to each other? Because this could also be misleading then.
Yeah, good question. So on creators, we ask people 2 questions. So we ask firstly a broader question, which is, do you get any content from creators or influencers who might sometimes talk about news and current affairs? So it's a very wide net there. The second question was, we said to people, are you getting content from people who mainly focus on the news? Right? So the numbers that you saw there that's data from that narrower question, right? Now, we can't determine how people answer the question. So it was phrased narrowly as creators who mainly focus on the news. And then that list that you saw there that's us simply pulling the data from all the responses where we said to people, if you use some of these creators, please name up to 3 that you use, and those were the most mentioned ones in answer to that question.
We have time for one more question. I know there were more hands up. I don't know, maybe you're available later in the lobby to ask questions, Jim, also?
Here all day.
Yeah, he's here all day. So, but the man who survived the night with just the fan and without air conditioning deserves the last short question.
Thank you. This was the second time I had a hotel in Germany without air conditioning.
We
So
really apologize. I'm sorry.
So I deserved it. Anyway, I'm Sabir Mustafa. I was a colleague of Jim at the BBC World Service for a time. I was there for 24 years, and then Voice of America for a year and a half, until Mr. Trump came and turfed us out. So now I'm a freelancer and trying to be one of the...
You have 10 seconds.
Yeah, one of the news, the dreaded news creators. And my question is about the news creators. That the news creators' popularity is rising, but it's slowly. And it is possible because they are not shackled by the editorial guidelines, social media guidelines of the established media. And they are more free, more fearless to give their opinion. So do you think this kind of presentation popularity would force the traditional media to loosen up their guidelines and restrictions a bit more?
Okay, we are going to have a longer conversation about this outside. I think you need to think very carefully about who's in this news creator landscape. Some of them enjoy not being shackled by editorial guidelines. Some of them, as they grow, start to discover they're turning into exactly the sorts of news businesses that they left. Because it's important to have editorial guidelines, and the audience is bothered about this sort of thing as well. And I think the whole creator conversation is going to be less about who are these creators and more about what are they doing and what are the aspects of what they're doing that we can learn from in our own news organizations to the benefit of the audience.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim. Great session, very interesting. We're going to take a short break. So everybody else in the other sessions can make their way here, and please come back for the interview with Irene Khan later on.